Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 190th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly. Excuse me, I almost tripped over my tongue. Twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the employment situation in the U.S. Politicians seem to be in a permanent state of promoting job creation and or providing assistance to the unemployed. Given today's situation with more job openings than available people, is it time for a new strategy? Discussing this topic this morning is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council, Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&D Financial Services, Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, and Joe Gaines, former faculty member of the University of Akron. Patty, given what appears to be a full employment economy, do you think this is a good time to embark on a massive infrastructure program?
When we look at creation of jobs, I think that has always been an issue that politicians look for. If you look at voters and what their big concerns are in the last presidential elections, governor elections, senator and House representative elections, that's always been maybe not the top issue, but it's been a big issue. I know there were years when they said jobs, 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 and that was the big issue. We're now at a point, however, where jobs are more, they're filled. Obviously, the unemployment rates are way down. We don't have situations like we did back during the Depression, when Roosevelt came in and was able to create government programs in order to provide jobs for people, to basically tide them through the Depression. Those jobs were not looked upon as lifetime positions, but simply positions that would enable people to get through the Depression and be able to feed their families and provide some type of shelter for them, because there was that necessity. In the United States today, well, we still do have that problem. Obviously, there are more jobs out, or less jobs out there. I should say more jobs than we have people to fill them. Unfortunately, many of those openings, and most of the openings, are in the restaurant and hospitality area. And that's not to say that there aren't manufacturing jobs that are going unfilled, or normal small business, but the restaurant, particularly fast food restaurants and hospitality, are quite low. Some of this can be blamed on COVID because people were afraid to get the job. I think part of the problem is that those jobs traditionally did not pay higher wages, did not offer benefits, and were definitely not looked upon as lifetime jobs. They were looked on as starter jobs, for high school kids or college students to work at until they got their lifetime profession. Now, those industries have taken great strides in trying to increase their rates of pay by providing benefits. However, for example, in the restaurant industry, the margin of profit is really quite low. And in many cases, they cannot afford to add increase to their pay or add benefits, because they simply would be working for nothing. This is why we had some of the stimulus help that was provided to these industries during the recent pandemic. My concern with your question, however, was when we equate it to the infrastructure. And, many people look upon infrastructure as simply a way to provide jobs for people. I don't think that's the reason for infrastructure improvements. Infrastructure is one of those rare issues that on a bipartisan level is supported. And it's not necessarily to provide jobs, but rather to provide that we have safe and we have quality infrastructure within the country, whether it be improved roads, improved bridges, train, all of these different things. You look at Europe with the train travel that they have and the easy accessibility from one country to another. We don't have that in the United States anymore. There are certain parts on the East Coast, for example, where there is train accessibility. We do not have that in the Midwest. In Wadsworth, we don't even have a taxi company. So we don't have that. We look back at the condition, though, of our roads and our bridges, and for safety's sake, they need to be improved. It wasn't that many years ago that the bridge in Minnesota, that very large one, and I can't remember the name of it, collapsed, killing many people and, obviously causing concern. We have roads that are ready to crumble. We have, and safety wise, this just can't be upheld. We had an incident a couple years ago in Wadsworth where the College Street culvert was collapsing. Now, had it collapsed, it could have caused a great deal of injury and so forth. Now, we were very fortunate in Wadsworth because we were able to deduce that it needed to be replaced immediately. We were also extremely fortunate in that the city, being forward-looking, already had placed money in the budget to replace that culvert because we knew that it needed replaced.
Where was that, Patty?
On College Street, right before you get to Letterman Road.
Down by the park.
Yeah, right across from the park. And while it was very inconvenient, we were able to get it done in a really remarkably fast time. Now, part of the reason, because we already had planned to do that, we knew that it needed replaced. We just didn't think it would need to be replaced that quickly. We had a lot of the engineering studies done already, a lot of the groundwork laid, and we had the money set aside. So the road only had to be closed for a couple of months as opposed to 6 months or a year. We're also in a situation in Wadsworth where we have, a great number of the water lines, of the sewer lines are old. Many are 100+ years old. They are small, they're out of date, and they are not in good shape. And the city has been, over the last few years, under the direction of Mayor Laubaugh, have been able to replace a great deal of these. Now, this is important infrastructure work that we need to do. And I think all cities, especially those as they turn older, need to do for the safety of the citizens and just for the normal operation.
The question is, do we have the workers to take care of all that work?
We have on those issues, we have been able to do that. And
in the past, yes.
And in the past, and I think that we still do. But to say that we shouldn't do infrastructure because GetCo doesn't have enough employees and they should be working there instead, I think infrastructure has to be placed as a high priority. And those are extremely high paying jobs when you do the construction on that type of work. And they are likely to draw people to them. So I don't like to equate the one with the other because I don't think that the one is necessarily a job creation program.
Yeah.
Nor do I think it should be ignored because there are other positions that are not being filled.
Okay, Brian, what are your thoughts?
Well, Patty brings up some good points. A lot of communities aren't well managed. They don't have people like Patty Haskins that puts her politics aside after she gets elected and does things for the good of the community. You don't find forward-thinking people in some of these larger cities that are just going hand to mouth, and their roads are dilapidated, their bridges are crumbling, and they're off on some sort of social justice mission,
right?
That doesn't really benefit the community other than it makes people feel good for a little while. So over a long period of time, Wadsworth has benefited from people like Patty and Bruce Darlington and, my wife to a certain degree, good mayors, good city council people that do what's best for the community, that puts it ahead. Our community is way ahead because people years ago decided that We wanted to have our own electricity. We wanted to have our own cable. Now, people sometimes complain about that, but you look around at other communities and their rates are considerably more than Wadsworth. And
I would like to inject this just for a moment. Pardon me for interrupting.
go ahead.
When Brenda and I moved to Wadsworth in 1963, one of the things that impressed me about the community is that it was one of only 5 school districts in the entire state of Ohio that was debt-free.
Mm-hmm.
There were some really smart people, did a lot of good planning early on.
Right.
And
Right.
every time a new school was built, it was paid for when they opened the door.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I just wanted
No,
to throw
and,
that in.
and that just shows you that the forward thinking of the people in the school system, the city government, the employees. I mean, you can spread all the, all this around to a lot of people that care about the community. The problem that I see that we're facing now is that law of unintended consequences. We've created a system, a safety net that now provides, with a variety of welfare things, enough money for people to basically stay home. Those jobs that were meant to be jobs to introduce people to work, that high school kids, that maybe you had someone that had an issue, an addiction issue, or having a problem getting a job. Those were good jobs that paid okay, that got them into a company that they could polish their employment skills. And people forget that when you send your kid out the door and he goes to work in the summertime for XYZ company, he's not just getting paid, he's learning how to work with other people and to deal with the public and to be on time, all those things that come along with being a good employee. I would dare say that everybody on the panel was probably a pretty good employee. You showed up to work on time, you did your job, you did your best to further the mission of the business that you were in, or the school system that you were in, and you were rewarded for that, not just with pay, but with skills that transcend that particular job. So right now, there are plenty of jobs out there. It's just that when someone can stay home, and I'm not saying this is all the problem, I'm saying this is part of the problem, when they can stay home and make enough to get by. Human nature is such that, and I go back to a book that I've read, Bridges Out of Poverty, people will adjust their lifestyle to the lowest, basically, common denominator. If they make $1,300 a month, they'll figure out a way to make it, instead of saying, hey, you know what? Back in the day, and when the Depression, when they had these jobs, when people wanted to work, it was a matter of pride, that they wanted to work. And so whether it was a shovel, a pick, a rake, they wanted to work. And I think we've lost a little bit of that everyone thinks they're going to be some sort of an Instagram star. They're going to be a basketball, a multi-billionaire. They're going to be a rapper. It's just, we've maybe lost our edge a little bit when it comes time to having pride in our work. And work sometimes is dirty. Work sometimes is monotonous. Work sometimes is just hard. But we did it. The country wasn't built on people wanting to basically sit home. My grandfather worked for Firestone Tire and Rubber as a tire builder for 40 years. And I don't think it ever possessed him that he would just stay home. He got up at 5 a.m. and went off to work. And my dad did the same thing. I think we've sort of lost a little bit of that desire to say, you know what, I want to be able to take care of myself, and I'll work that job. There are so many jobs out there. If anybody needed a part-time job, I think these employers would say, we'll bend over backwards, just come in and work from 6 to 10, or, just help us out here. And we're seeing that now, that, every fast food place, every manufacturer, you can't go anywhere without seeing help wanted signs, and they're paying, they're good jobs. They're paying good. Now, they might not be that career job, but at least it will be that job, that bridge that gets you to that career job. And that's how I feel about a lot of the places that people complain about sometimes, like Walmart. I believe Walmart's in a partnership with the government, because if Walmart wasn't hiring those, that subset of people that are just trying to get back in, we'd have our welfare rolls would just be exploding. So those are good jobs for people. There's nothing wrong with them. Take pride in your work. Don't be afraid to work. And I think that's part of the solution.
I think in the old days, those values were learned in the family, and the collapse of the American family has had an awful lot to do with the situation you're talking about.
Yeah.
Ron, what do you think? Did you get to work on time?
Mostly. Actually, I didn't a lot in Danbury, because I was taking a kid to school because he had trouble with the school buses. So I usually wound up a little bit late. But I was very fortunate to be able to be on salary rather than an hourly rate. I was an exempt employee, so called. So I had an ability to come in a little bit late and stay late, which I did most days. Quitting time was 4:30.
I wasn't asking you to. I wasn't asking you to explain yourself. I would just.
No. It's just that different situation and some of the folks that Bryan is describing here. And Bryan, I don't know how much of what you say is oversimplification, but certainly there's a lot of truth to it, I think. And as John said, part of it's the family. With Patty, I agree that I don't see that infrastructure and the unemployment or the employment rate is really mutually exclusive here, because we need the infrastructure. We certainly do. If you've ever taken a ride out in the countryside here and dodging potholes, it's true. It's true in roads. It's true in bridges. And as far as the government, emphasis on infrastructure and even the extended infrastructure, the $3.5 trillion business, a lot of that is necessary eventually, if not now. And much of it is necessary now. And we got to find a way to pay for it. And that's a whole other issue, or at least a related issue, but we need that. And I don't know that if the infrastructure jobs are available, they are generally high paying jobs. I worked for a while on that. I worked for the state highway in my college years, leaning on a shovel alongside the road. So it paid well. It didn't last long, but it paid well for the course of the summer, and it still does. So I think that Patty's right, that if the jobs are there, that they will be filled. And part of my comment, I think, is that if people don't want to come and get a $13 an hour job, maybe that's the rate being offered, not the person so much. However, I do remember a clip some years back where someone said, well, when immigrants came to this country, they expected there were streets of gold. Turns out the streets were not gold, they were not paved, and they were expected to pave them. And that happened. People did work. So I think they still would, if infrastructure jobs are available. I think they still would work for them.
I guess, Joe, my point is once we pass the $1.5 trillion roads and bridges infrastructure bill, are we going to find anybody to repair the infrastructure? I mean, where are we going to get the road pavers and bridge builders from?
Good question. Not from me.
Me either.
This topic's interesting because it's very vast. But there's a word missing that we haven't used yet. We kind of bounced around it, and that's the word responsibility. We have responsibilities in this country to our government, to our people, but basically to the people. And are we being responsible? And are the people being responsible? If, I can remember when the problem was there's no jobs out there. And because there was no jobs out there, a lot of people weren't going to go to work because there wasn't any jobs. Well, there's jobs out there now. But where's the people at? Where's the workers? Why aren't they responsible enough to go out and look for it, try it? It's not going to be easy. There's some really difficult jobs. It's not all burgers and fries and all that.
Yeah.
I worked in a steel mill as a kid. I delivered papers as a kid. The steel mill was interesting. I learned a lot from the people I worked with. And listening to other people on the panel, you learn a lot from what they're talking about and where they worked and the things that they did. I think we need to take pride, that's another word, in what we do. And pride that we do have these jobs and that we can fill them. And even though you're not doing the job that you want to do for the rest of your life, you're working. Why is that why is that so unimportant? It isn't unimportant. It's very important.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the problems that we have is there are too many people that don't invest in their own future.
Yeah.
The young people that would rather lay around and watch TV and play video games rather than go to some kind of training.
Except
I
for
mean,
video games, are you talking about now or are you talking about 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago? You would have heard that same argument from people.
yeah,
One of the differences now is I have a member of the family, not my kids, but his intent is to be a video gamer as a position.
Yeah.
And I don't understand this, that he belongs to like a video game club in high school and is intending to make a career out of this, something to do with the skills that are used in playing a video game translates itself to something in high tech. It's confusing to me. But when we talk about, traditional jobs, people are looking at these non-traditional jobs. Bryan mentioned them. I said influencer. How many times have you watched a television show, and I was watching Dancing with the Stars of all things, and you have people that are defined as an influencer. I don't want to be influenced.
Right.
So, but those are the jobs people are looking for. They're not looking for the job that requires a little bit of grit and a little bit of work. They're looking for the more attractive position. I know we talk about, I packed flowers at Yoder's greenhouse. I waitressed at Big Boy in Barberton. I worked at Marshall's department store along with every other female in Barberton, Ohio of my age. So we all had jobs that weren't that great. Very honestly, that's what got me through college, because I didn't want to do those jobs all of my life. So
And let me make this point. And it was though there were those jobs, you didn't sit around dreaming about being whatever your pipe dream was at the time,
right.
You went out and you said, you know what, if I'm going to get there, I need to have the day job or I need to have the night job. I have to be able to get there. You didn't sit around and say, you know what, someday I want to be a teacher. And I'm just going to wait for that to happen.
I remember my dad telling me about my grandfather who worked for Goodrich. He was a tire builder, like your grandfather, Bryan. And during the Depression, Dad told me that Grandpa would get up, go up and catch a bus, go into work. And then when he got there, they would tell him if they had work for him.
Yeah.
And if they didn't, he would turn around, get back on the bus and come home. But he did that every day just to make sure that if there was a chance to get money to put food on the table for my dad and his 4 siblings, he was able to do that.
Yeah.
That's a work ethic that we rarely see. I saw that work ethic in my father. I know where he got it. Hopefully I had a little bit of it. So,
well, and I think you do. I think the people on the panel are part of a dying breed that, my grandpa worked at Firestone, but when times were tough, he took a job at night at the local movie theater, taking tickets and cleaning up the theater till 12 or 1 o'clock. He wasn't, there was no job that was beneath him. He would go out and work and to provide for his family. And I think we've lost that because we have people, maybe your nephew wants to go into the Air Force and be a drone pilot. You
Yeah,
know?
I think that's kind of where they're going.
That's where that particularly, so every generation seems to have, before it was, I want to be a professional basketball player, a baseball player. Well, there's a very small percentage of those. You better have a plan B. If you think you're going to get a college scholarship to play football, baseball, whatever, and be a professional athlete, because most times it's not going to happen. I don't want to burst your bubble, but you've got to be able to provide for yourself when that dream doesn't come true. And I think that's what we're missing with some of the folks today, is that they're just waiting for that dream job to open up, and it doesn't, not going to happen.
Well, I was-
Might happen.
Still the thing, this man is an overnight sensation after working at his 12 for 20 years,
Right.
I know
Yeah,
when I was a
exactly.
kid, my dream was to play shortstop for the Indians. My plan B was to play second base.
And you ended up at Rubbermaid.
Well, I ended up at General Tire before that. I was a child of the tire
Right,
industry
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
You
Patty's-
mentioned, oh, go ahead, John.
No, I said your story reminded me of my father. He started working at Goodyear when he was 17. And for the next 40 years, he worried that they were going to catch him in the lie. He said he was 18. And he thought, one of these days I'm going to have to work an extra year in order to retire.
You mentioned multiple jobs. My dad, I know when he was first married and when my brother and I were born, he worked at Goodrich during the day. He had a second job he'd go into at night at a machine shop in Akron. And then on weekends, he poured cement with my uncle. He was able to, my dad was never wealthy, but boy, he was able to provide a good family life for all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
never,
they're going to shut us off any second now. Thank you very much, folks,
Yep.
for a good
Good talk with
program.
everybody.
I had some doubts about this topic, but you came through again. Thank you.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.